Welcome to another episode of Supy Talks. Today, I'm joined by Amy Glover, who brings almost 20 years' experience working at large groups such as Greene and Mitchell & Butlers in the UK, where she led marketing, brand, and guest experience across a large portfolio of bars, pubs, and hotels. Amy recently moved to Dubai, where she brings her experience in fixing, scaling, and differentiating hospitality brands to the GCC. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's lovely to speak to you today. Thanks for taking the time to come in.
Not at all, my pleasure.
So before we dive in for real, could you just give us a few details about your career and walk us through some of the brands you've worked at?
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, I've worked in this industry now for quite a long time. I think a lot of people that work in this industry will tell you once you start, you don't want to stop. So it's an industry that I have a lot of fondness for. I've worked for many different brands across restaurants, hotels and pubs, as you've mentioned. I mean, I am from the UK and us British do love a good pub.
We do.
We do. And actually those brands have spanned across various different sectors of the market. So right through value, mainstream and premium. A lot of the brands that I've worked on have been brands at scale. So brands that have normally been between sort of 100 and 200 venues, which is, I guess, something that is a specialism of mine now. So really trying to define, have that brand clarity to ensure that every brand has the right consistency across all of the venues. What can I say about the brands I've worked on? So it's been a mix of everything from, healthy salad and grill restaurants to premium steakhouses, to more of the kind of rural British country pubs, to even like family-friendly cafe sort of brands. So a real mix. It's been quite a journey. I've really enjoyed every brand that I've worked on. I think that over time, my role has evolved. So it started off many a year ago as your sort of, I guess, typical marketing role. So like very much focused around creating the building blocks for a great brand. So everything around menu development, pricing strategy, comms, campaign management, you name it, like everything that I guess most people would relate to a marketing role, all about how you acquire guests and bring them in. Over time, that has evolved into roles that have been more focused around brand strategy and defining the brand and guest experience, which is a real passion point of mine now, and I really do love. And actually, my roles have then gone from more brand-focused roles into more portfolio-wide kind of strategic projects and initiatives to help some of the groups that I've worked in. So done various things like launching a new service transformational program across about 600 venues, helped launch a multi-million-pound order and pay loyalty app across, again, hundreds of venues, all of which really just trying to enhance the in-venue guest experience. So I would say the key focus for me has always been, being that real bridge between brand and marketing and ops. And I think that's one of the topics that we're probably going to dive into today, because it's something that is quite a passion point of mine for sure.
Amazing. Well, thanks for that explanation. And that is the first thing I wanted to touch on, because when we were speaking earlier, I was quite struck by how you were talking about how brand and ops need to be close partners of each other. And that's something that I've seen in many companies not being true. So do you want to tell me about why you think that's important and how that's played out in real life?
Yeah, absolutely. So, everyone that knows me knows that it is a real passion of mine. And it's something that I've always invested a lot of time and energy into when it comes to building the relationships that I have with the operators that are my like counterparts within each brand. I think just to put it really clearly, I think the reason why for me it's so important is if you take a marketeer that works in an FMCG brand, you are essentially creating a product and marketing that product, whether it be a bottle of shampoo, a pair of jeans, a packet of crisps, whatever it is. And you're essentially building that product and taking it directly to the consumer. Whereas in this industry, we are creating a product that includes the food, the drink, absolutely, but equally includes the experience and the service. And that as a kind of holistic product is very, very different. And for me, you know, when it comes to operators, they're not just the middle layer between myself and the consumer or the customer or the guest or however you want to describe them. I'll probably flip-flop from saying all of those words at some point. But they are part of the product. Yeah. So actually, if they don't understand the brand vision, the brand values, what it is that we're trying to achieve as part of the brand, it just falls down for me. It just completely falls down. Like, they need to be fully engaged and like almost like I am their number one ally just as much as they are mine. And we have to work in partnership for that, essentially, that experience to work.
Yeah, because they operate part of your product.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I think something quite unique to hospitality, that if you want to make a change to how the brand functions, you need those ops people on side
100%.
To make it happen in reality.
Yeah.
So how do you go about building that trust? Because it must be quite tricky when people like to, you know, do things how they were or how they've set it up, but you have to work in partnership. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, it's a really good one. So I think for me, it's just about investing the time and energy into building that relationship. And, you know, it's important for them to know me, for me to know them. Like particularly when it's a like operational director or like someone that becomes my counterpart that I'm literally working hand in hand with. So for them to kind of understand my values and how I'm going to show up is really important. For them to know that, like, even when it comes to venue managers, that I'm not here to, you know, negatively impact their venue. I'm here to do what I can to enhance their offer, their product, their experience. And it's just, one, spending the time with them, listening to them, making sure that they understand that actually I not only have worked on the front line myself, so I understand the challenges that they face, and I'm very empathetic to that. But yeah, I just make sure that everything that I'm doing, I have like a pragmatism, if you like, against will this work from an operational standpoint. And it doesn't stunt my kind of creative vision, but I always make sure it kind of grounds me in what I know will work well. And I'll, on top of that, because this is such a subjective industry, like we're all consumers, we all like eating out, we all have an opinion on what that could look like. I always make sure that actually when I come with an idea or an initiative, that it's not based on just my opinion, it's based on consumer data and insight, and it's based on what we know our target market are looking for, what their emotional needs are, etc. So it's really grounded in that as opposed to just my opinion. Yeah.
And if you're both focusing on like what the customer or the market wants, then you're naturally going to be aligned anyway.
Yeah.
So what happens if they're not aligned? If you're not aligned between ops and brand, and have you seen that happen?
Definitely. So I think there's a number of things that can happen here for me, and I have experienced both. And that's why I always put so much effort into making sure that we are aligned. And hopefully all the operators that have worked with me in the past will, that'll resonate with them. So I personally think that when it's not aligned, it's not like the brand will dramatically break down. I think it kind of erodes with time. So I think that the brand experience, like bear in mind, I'm working on brands that have got 100 or 200 venues. So everything that we're creating as a kind of North Star, as a brand vision, has to trickle down to multiple different layers before it gets to the front line and to the customer or guest. So over time, if one of those layers are not on board, if don't feel engaged, don't quite understand what it is that we're trying to do, then over time, it will just start to show up from a consumer perspective in a really inconsistent manner. So, you know, it will like the business will start to pay for it, and they'll pay for it by all of the initiatives that we try and sort of roll out. There's really little engagement around them. Marketing spend starts to get wasted because of that. The frontline teams feel like we're not listening to them, and they're disengaged because what we're asking them to deliver versus the reality of their day-to-day don't quite match up. So over time, it just presents this gap between brand intent and the reality of what that looks like. And eventually that gap, like, you start to lose trust in the guest because it's not consistent. You start to lose engagement with the team. It just doesn't work.
It sounds like it makes perfect sense on paper, but I feel like your experience and skill is in not just explaining how it works like this, but actually going and making it happen. I feel like from speaking to you, I've learned that you are so involved and on the ground, seeing how your decisions impact them, that I feel like probably that's where the magic is in making it happen.
Yeah.
Are there any kind of tips around that, taking your vision and making sure at all levels of the organization it comes to life?
Yeah. So I would say that it's just firstly having really clear sort of comms channels. So thinking about what are those moments where I can either bring a brand to life in a really visual storytelling way, whether it's like a biannual conference where we can get up on stage and really bring it to life in a great way for them, whether it's kind of weekly or monthly newsletters or comms that is a really clear and succinct way of sending messages down to the venues, or if it's actually spending time mainly with like the sort of director levels or regional manager levels where they're really on board with what it is that the brand is trying to do, which in turn they then enable their own teams to feel like they're on board also. And there's, I think for me, it's just making sure that there is a two-way comms between us and operators. So we're always listening, understanding, and trying to make sure that there is a good middle ground in terms of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that communication is always a really key piece. And I've seen it done really well without any technology, but I think there are quite a few kind of startups and restaurant tech companies focusing on that right now. I've seen All Gravy in use at some really cool UK brands, and communicating in a way that works for each generation as well. Because I think one thing that I've heard being discussed recently is how to communicate all of that stuff to Gen Z, who every generation has kind of their ways of communicating. The core of it's all the same, but how to get it across in a way they to pay attention to. So I'm kind of interested to see where that space goes as well.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And actually, in the business that I was last in, which was Greene King, so we actually launched a training platform that was like a gamification platform that was used on like mobile phones, and was just a really nice way of kind of bringing to life any new menus, any training, without it feeling like we're asking them to sit through a 5-minute video and then like fill in a little quiz afterwards to check that they've been listening. It's just more of an engaging way of doing it. So you're absolutely right. I think businesses keeping up with that mindset and the way that particularly Gen Z like to learn is really important.
Yeah, keeping it on mobile for sure.
Yeah.
Did they build that tech in-house, or was it like a software?
No, it was a partner.
Oh, nice.
It was a partner, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great, amazing. Yeah. Okay, so now we've gone through what happens if it goes wrong a little bit in that operation. I think one of the things I was really impressed at when we were speaking is your experience with Miller and Carter Steakhouse.
Yes.
I think under the time you were there, they grew from about 2 to 100 locations.
20 to 100.
Sorry, 20 to 100 locations.
2 to 100 would be even more impressive, but you're right.
Fine, so 20 to 100 locations in the UK. What was so special about that brand, and what did you get right to make that happen?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, even after all the brands that I've worked on, this still probably to this day is one of my favorite brands to actually talk about because it just was so special. And it was so special for so many reasons. And I think everyone that's worked on this brand can absolutely kind of validate that. So I joined in 2013. I was there for 5 years. When I joined, there was 20 restaurants. And when I left, actually the day that I left, we opened our 100th. So there's a few things there. So firstly, it was a managed estate. It wasn't franchised. So actually, managing that type of rapid expansion growth within a managed estate is actually quite a challenge, as opposed to using franchise partners to help you do that at pace. So there was a number of different things that I think we had to do to try and make sure that that was as successful as it could be. And for anyone that's thinking about growing a brand that's, around about, say, 10 to 20 and thinking about how you expand that, whether it's a managed kind of business model or a franchise, I think the same rules actually apply to an extent. They might just be slightly different. So the first one was around probably for the first year that I was there, we just focused on refining that offer. So being really clear of what our reason for being was, our purpose. I think we were guilty of before, because the brand had been around for about 5 years before I came on board. We've been guilty before of probably trying to be all things to everyone. Sorry, I keep knocking this.
That's okay. That's all right. Don't worry.
Trying to be all things to everyone. And we just decided to be a lot more pinpointed and just double down on what we knew we were great at, which was steak. Yes, there were other elements of the offer around steak, but like ultimately we were like, right, if we want to be known for the best steak in the country, particularly for the sector of the market that we sat in, which was the mid-market, and sort of attracting that mid-market guest for that more special occasion in a suburbia setting, which was quite a unique sort of offering at that point in time. There were not many brands in the UK that were either sort of focused on that mid-market for special occasion, or were focused on a suburban location as opposed to big central city centres.
Yeah.
So we refined the offer. We, even started to sort of elevate the idea of it's not just a steak dish, it's a steak experience, and really try to sell it in that way, which worked very well. We elevated the comms around that, so we made it feel more premium and more like that kind of special occasion set. And then once we had that, the second thing was how we then codified it. So once we'd got all the brand in a really strong position and we were able to start winning awards, getting ourselves like credentials around our steak quality, we proved to the business and to ourselves that this is a really great business model. The average spend per head was so much higher than any other brands that were in that company at the time. Our volume and our sales were just crazy. So we were like, right, the business model works. Now let's find a way of expanding it. So the second thing was how we then codified that. So everything that you could possibly think of, whether it be around brand standards, dish specs, service signatures, social media guidelines, everything was put into a guideline to make sure that regardless of who picked that up, they couldn't get confused about what this brand stood for. And we were only a really small team, and we knew we had to grow quickly in order for this to work. So that in itself had to be part of it. Like, I knew I couldn't be in every meeting, in every room. So I had to make sure that it was just codified in the best possible way. So that's the second thing. The third thing was probably more so around, and actually this is probably the biggest one, was just around our focus on people. And that has like multiple factors involved. Yeah. Honestly, if I was to boil it down to one thing as to why that brand was so special, it was the time and effort that people in that brand put into cultivating an incredible culture. And what that meant was that even when I joined and there was, various people that worked in the kind of corporate team, and there were 20 or so GMs that were in the venues, they'd been around for as long as the brand had been there. So they were all highly engaged, highly passionate, and all wanted to feel part of whatever journey we were about to embark on. So rather than us, kind of like not getting them as involved in the process as what we could have done, and actually bear in mind that when you've got such a small special brand that's doing incredibly well, the instant thought from a lot of people is, you can't grow this. It's going to ruin this special nature of this small brand that we've got right now. If you grow it, it's going to become this kind of corporate machine that is not going to feel as special. So we work really, really hard on kind of defining the brand values, the culture, and bringing everyone on that journey with us, to the point that we brought all the managers into like a 2-day strategy meeting where we'd have flip charts on the walls and we'd go, right, how are we going to tackle this? Like, how are we going to do this together? What are the key things that we need to think about in terms of, our brand values, our training programs, our recruitment? How are we really going to make sure that what is so amazing about this brand right now, we don't lose?
It sounds a bit like you kind of made sure that early pool of 20 or so GMs, regional managers or whatever, were involved in the growth, rather than, so it kind of being, of course, like the overall strategy led by the wider group or the senior managers in there, but making sure that people that had built it were involved in its growth as well. Yeah. So like not being completely top down.
100%. Yeah. So as part of that, and I think kind of following on nicely from that, I think what was different about when I worked in that brand versus maybe others is that nobody saw brand as the responsibility of the marketing and brand team. It was everyone's responsibility. So everyone was essentially a brand ambassador. Everyone was responsible for speaking brand language, for sharing the brand values, for protecting whatever felt special about that brand and never allowing that to kind of erode away. And there was that shared responsibility, which was really, really quite special. And on top of that, when it came to people, I think one of the key learnings that we had really quickly is that in order for that to not erode away, every new manager that came on board, bearing in mind we had to get 80 new managers on board. We were probably launching a new venue on average every 2 weeks. I mean, it was a rapid growth. So every manager wasn't even handed over a set of keys until they'd spent 3 months in one of our existing venues. They absolutely lived and breathed the brand. They felt just as passionate about it as the existing teams. We took them all through the field and fork, right through that whole journey. So they felt just as passionate about the product as we did before they then were given the keys. And having that strong backbench of managers ready to go before you even launch a new venue, I think was the key to the success, honestly.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. They're ready to go. They've been in and experienced the brands, the whole restaurant setup before they start serving customers.
Yeah.
That sounds really important. And within that, did you have a special openings team to support that, or was it built store by store?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we did. So there was a point where, it kind of became a very big side of the desk job for a lot of the existing support teams to begin with. And then as we started to rapidly roll out, the business realised that they needed to invest in the right opening teams to make sure that that worked effectively. Because as soon as I was spending all my time on new openings, the existing estate, we've got to keep the wheels on the bus here as well as launching new sites over here. So 100%, it wouldn't have worked without the new openings team, where we had trainers and we had people that were literally on the ground making sure that everything was set up, ready to go. All of the deliveries were, scheduled, etc. It was literally like a machine. The amount of people that kind of were all collectively part and parcel of that growth was huge.
And that's why I was going to ask a question around how it sustained its growth since you've left, because it's a brand that's still doing incredibly well in the UK. But I think you've kind of answered that, in as much as all of that work around codifying things and having the right people and building the right system is, I assume, the thing that kept it going. Is that from your point of view?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think it just had really strong kind of foundations, really enabled it to get to where it has done. But equally, I think one of the biggest things that has allowed it to continue is really good leadership. So, if you've got a leader that knows what needs to be done to protect a brand, even in its darkest hours, when, from a commercial standpoint, there's a lot of market pressure and, the cost of red meat goes through the roof and the cost of labor goes sky high. All of these things are factors that every operator in the industry has to deal with. But if you know that there's a certain kind of, there's a certain, I don't know how to describe it, like a framework within the brand that's we're not touching this. There are other levers that we'll happily pull here to make this work, but actually these are the things that we're going to fully protect because we know how important they are for the brand and the reason why people come back time and time again. And it's those great leaders and the culture that's enabled the brand to expand and to continue to do so well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And just last point on this, but what were those things that were untouchable within the brand that you would keep, even if it didn't necessarily make commercial sense on paper, but because they kept it what it was?
It's a really good question. So I remember Gosh, it was probably around 10, it was probably like 10 years ago now. But I remember even sitting in a room with loads of different people, sort of the ops lead. We got our pricing manager, various different people, and we're like, right, this is the challenge that we have right now. And there was the challenge around, it was the cost of red meat.
Yeah.
And we basically said, like, we either choose to reduce the quality of this steak to, X grade, or we find a way around it, whether it be to kind of slightly change some of the portion sizes of the sides, or like whatever it may be. There were certain elements of the experience, the steak, that we were like, we cannot reduce or lose this. And we had to make some really difficult decisions, whether it be around price or labour, or trying to get that fine balance around what is the overall cost model of this business in order to make sure that this particular part of it is protected. That's probably the one that comes front of mind for me.
That makes total sense. And it's such a good example of a brand that really has kept what's important to it going, and it's still doing great. So well done, Miller and Carter. And there are other examples where brands may be acquired or built within larger groups kind of lose some of their essence or merge into other brands from the same group. Have you worked on any of those in your time, and have you got any examples?
Yeah, so I have actually. I mean, firstly, I would say that there's probably 3 or 4 reasons as to why I believe a kind of F&B brand will lose its way over time. And it tends to be one of these 4 things. So you've either got lack of brand clarity. So actually people within that business just don't quite understand what that brand is there to do, what the purpose is. And therefore, like, over time, it's interpreted in different ways. And therefore, you kind of get a bit of brand drift depending on the venue or the region. And that's where, like, codifying it with brand standards, etc., is really important. The second thing is, normally, and this is like the catalyst to brand drift, is commercial pressure, which we've talked a bit about. But actually, it's in those moments where the behaviours of the leadership team are so important. Because if all of a sudden the commercial pressure starts to create these knee-jerk, more short-term tactical decisions around offers, promotions, changes to the menu, changes to labour ratio, whatever it will be, actually that's when, from a consumer perspective, that sort of what we've talked about before, that intent versus reality starts to drift further apart, and there's a gap between the two, and you start to lose trust. On top of that, when there's less consistency and you start to all of a sudden create all these random offers that aren't quite aligned to the brand, what you also lose over time is what I call, like, vivid recall. So from a consumer perspective, you know in your mind, if you're looking to go out for a steak or for a breakfast with your family or whatever it may be, you've normally got a couple of brands front and center of your mind that you go, let's go there. Whereas over time, if you've got a brand that, I don't know, let's just say it's a high energy bar where you've got loads of cocktails and it's more kind of adult friendly. And then all of a sudden, due to commercial pressure, there's people within that business that decide to try and drive footfall in a different time slot. So you start offering a family friendly breakfast. It feels like misaligned with what the brand stands for. And then all of a sudden, from a consumer standpoint, it gets a little bit confusing. So I think that's when brands can start to feel lost, when they're trying to appease everyone as opposed to just stay in a lane. And then the last one is just simply brands not staying adrift with more macro consumer trends. And that's where longer term brand strategy comes into play, and having someone in your business to help you with that, as opposed to just focusing on short term marketing plans.
No, that's a really good set of examples. And on the offers side and promotion side, it makes me think of one brand in the UK that I think that's done it really well is Megan's, because I've heard countless stories from my mum or friends of going and then being offered a free glass of Prosecco next time they come, if they come within 2 weeks. So it's a great offer that increases loyalty. The customer gets something they value, but also it gets that repeat rate up. And then over time, you're going to make more money from them. And that isn't a way that erodes the value. Well, there's a big well-known pizza chain that used to just start discounting and do 50% off. And I think there wasn't really a purpose behind it. And people started expecting the pizza at a certain price
So
point.
true. You
So when
do,
that offer
yeah.
wasn't there, then it would actually go against the
Yeah.
loyalty because
Yeah.
people would think, well, it's not an offer. I'm now used to that price. So I think when you give value rather than just like a set discount, it's in a way better to give something away for free to bring someone back than to set someone's expectation of a certain cost.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So I think there's
Yeah.
actually it's great points you've made, and that promotion and discount is kind of an interesting area to play in.
It is.
A dangerous area to play in as well. Is there any risk of letting kind of certain locations drift? Does that happen? Or and what can the impact of that be?
Honestly, I think it's just really, really simple that if like particular locations or venues start to drift, as we've said, I think it's often just down to like disengagement with the operators, and over time it just results in sort of inconsistency of offer for the guest, which just makes them lose trust in who you are as a brand.
And so part of your experience is helping brands evolve as they're on their journey.
Definitely the fun bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you have a really good framework for this. So what are the first couple of things you look at when you're brought into a new brand to understand what there is to evolve and what that needs fixing?
Yeah, sure. So when I first go into a brand, obviously I will have a view of that brand, whether it be from a consumer standpoint or just from what I've already been told from people that work there. But my sort of initial go-to is I basically try and work out where the biggest challenge lies. So firstly, is it the brand intent or is it the brand execution? And what I mean by the brand intent, and I think we've kind of touched upon this slightly, but it's what essentially are we saying is the brand's purpose, its market positioning, its values, its promises to the guest. How does that align with the target market, their emotional and functional needs? So if we look at those two things and go, do you know what, in terms of this brand, its vision, its long-term strategy, where it's focusing in, like in terms of its experience pillars, when we break that down into F&B offer, the environment, service, the comms, all of that, it beautifully aligns with what their target market is looking for, what that target market values and cares about. Tick, we're good. If it doesn't, then that's when you need to go through this whole realignment piece of actually either shifting its position in the market space, trying to change part of its experience to appeal to a different target market, which I've actually done with one of our brands before, where we were just getting to a point where the brand was becoming sort of too discount led, and as a result, we were attracting a guest that was just essentially spending too little with us. So what we were trying to then do was reposition it into a more affluent, premium part of the market. But in order to do that, we had to elevate the menu, we had to elevate the environment, we had to elevate everything that encouraged a different type of consumer to be comfortable enough to spend more money with us. So that was a whole big piece of work. But yeah, so intent is first, and just trying to understand like what is at the core of that brand and does it align with your target market. If that's all good, you then move on to the brand execution. And this isn't about pointing fingers or like placing blame. It's more about trying to find the gap or the disconnect between what we want this brand to look like and its vision versus the reality of what it's actually doing.
And there are often good reasons things have kind of drifted or happened in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where I kind of go into a deep dive of the brand in its entirety. So you could do it through like a SWOT framework where you're looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You could do it as, a framework through the 5 Ps, which is a kind of standard marketing framework where you're looking at people, place, price, promotion. And I always forget the 5th one.
Products, isn't it?
Products, there you go. But you're essentially just trying to work out through the eyes of the consumer, and also from a commercial standpoint, like what is the current kind of reality of the way that brand is performing. So looking at all your data through your tills, through your booking systems like 7 Rooms or any booking system that you may have, you can slowly start to work out like customer behavior, when they come to you, how often they stay with you, how much they spend, what's their average frequency, all of that sort of stuff. And then you combine that with actually just being in the venues and feeling it for yourself and kind of understanding what the team are thinking, if there's any kind of friction points or challenges in terms of what we're asking them to deliver versus what is actually feasible to. So it's kind of just doing a real holistic view of everything. And also looking at guest sentiment scores. So really trying to understand what are guests telling us now through all our reviews and any mystery shops or any way that you try and understand what the guest is telling you about your current experience. It's like it's being a detective. It's like unpicking it apart and trying to work it out.
And that's where I can see why you say it's so important for brands and operations to work as partners, because, you know, it's all well and good looking at some numbers in a head office, but the change comes from the people in the restaurant working on a daily basis. So if neither of those parties can positively influence each other, it's going to be difficult to change. That makes total sense.
100%.
Yeah. And when you're taking a new direction with a brand or evolving it, how do you kind of stress test if what you want to implement is feasible operationally?
Yeah. So firstly, it's making sure that whatever direction that we're taking is kind of built from insight and data. So that almost becomes your starting point. But once you've actually got to that point, let's just say I'm rolling this out across 200 venues and we're looking at evolving the menu range or changing our offers, pricing, or how the brand kind of shows up through its comms, whatever it looks like, or even bringing in some new tech that actually will impact the guest journey, or there's so many different kind of touch points within the experience, and I've dealt with so many of them in my time, which really looks at enhancing that overall experience. The number one thing that I would always do is just simply trialing it. Like literally allow the operators to break it for you before you roll it out is almost like my mantra. And actually I've naturally got that, like my brain works in that way where I stress test an idea from an operational standpoint before I think that it works. But I would make sure that I've got, whether you're a brand of 3 venues or 100 venues, there's always a way of doing a smaller version of that rollout to trial and test it first. You find a manager that is really engaged, willing to work in partnership with you, willing to learn as we go, share insight, and mold it into something that we collectively feel like can work for all different venues. Make sure that you're looking at the variables of that trial. So you're allowing it to be tested through quieter periods, busier periods, larger sites, smaller sites, just testing all those different things to make sure that whatever it is that you're trying to offer can essentially work from a team perspective, a customer perspective, and also a commercial perspective.
Yeah, that makes total sense again. And I think it goes to show that in your experiences, owning brands or marketing at a hospitality group is not just getting people through the door. But I know there are still a lot of groups out there that do think of marketing as get people through the door.
Yeah.
So what would you say to them about what marketing is or should be in a large-scale hospitality organization?
Yeah, so I've always worked in marketing roles that are really holistic marketing roles. So they are absolutely about acquiring new guests and finding strategies to bring them through the door, whether that be driving the visibility of the brand, looking at the digital platforms, looking at PR events, social media, you name it. There's all different strategies to try and drive the visibility of a brand, create really compelling content and bring people in. But that's just one part of it. That's essentially like topping up the funnel.
Phase one.
Yeah, phase one. Whereas like for me, marketing is so much more holistic than that. I genuinely believe that like real success happens when you've got a marketer that's in your business that is holistically looking at the end-to-end picture and is doing it from a really strategic standpoint. So it's not just the how we're driving people in the door and topping up that funnel. It's thinking about that in-venue experience, working alongside the operators to define all the different key pillars within that experience, and making sure that we are constantly using that customer feedback loop to understand what's working, what's not, iterate, evolve, adapt, and just constantly enhance that guest experience in order to drive repeat visit.
Yeah.
It's not just about topping it with new people. We want the people that have come to us to come back. So
yeah, you don't want a leaky bucket.
Yeah.
100%. Oh, that's great. That totally makes sense. And are there any examples you have of where, you've been trying to change things and they haven't quite worked, and there has maybe been a bit of a disconnect between the vision and what was possible in real life, or any launches when you're scaling up a chain that haven't quite gone to plan, and what have you learned from them?
Oh, wow. So yeah, there's been so many. I mean, you naturally just learn so much on this job.
Yeah.
And I think that's almost the sort of reality of anyone that's doing this job is naturally all of us, we're all human and we all make mistakes. But sometimes when you're in this type of role, your mistakes become like magnified.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about them. As soon as you make a typing like error on a menu and it's gone out to like 200 venues, your phone is off the hook. We're like, we know, we're going to deal with it for you. Yeah. One that comes to mind for me, which is quite, it's funny looking back, but at the time it just was not funny in the slightest. It was like in my earlier days, I was probably about 23. I've been doing the job for about 2 years. And I was launching a new dessert menu and a dessert range in a business that I was in that had about 220 venues. And this brand is kind of a salad and grill restaurant brand, very well known within the UK. And they had a couple of Sunday dishes on the dessert menu. So ice cream sundae, everyone's favourite. Yeah. We were like, right, well, let's make this a fame point. Everyone loves these. Let's go from 2 to 10. Let's make a nice big sundae range. Yeah. Let's, make it really theatre-based, colourful. I think we even had a collab with a famous chocolate brand. Like we really went to town with it. And I think we tested it a little bit, but we certainly didn't test it enough. And when we hit launch date, I remember it really well. And that particular week, we were constantly, on the phone or out and about visiting the venues and just getting a feel for how it was all going. And there were 3 big issues that came with this launch that honestly we just did not foresee, and we had to quickly kind of rectify and figure out a solution to. The first one was they were so popular, these sundaes, which is brilliant. But as a result, the ice cream machines that were in these kitchens just literally fall to pieces.
Wow.
The throughput that was required for the amount of sundaes that we were selling, the machine couldn't keep up with. So crazy. They just fell over.
That calculation hadn't been done.
Hadn't been done. The second issue was the fact that we'd made these sundaes so fantastic from a consumer perspective. We were like, they're going to love it. We've got all these amazing sauces and all these all the nice brownies, sprinkles, you name it. It was like going to town with it. But we made the recipe so complex that it just slowed down the kitchen. Yeah. So as a result, the kitchen was just at full capacity. Dishes were going out slower, and it had an impact on the guest. And the final one, which was like the nail in the coffin, was as well as those 2 things, what happened was because the sundaes were so big, we saw our dessert penetration drop, which in turn had a big impact on the P&L because what was happening was instead of you ordering a dessert and me ordering a dessert, we were like, wow, this is big enough for both of us. Let's just order one. So all in all, it was a complete disaster.
Sounds like people were bulk buying their desserts from you.
Oh, gosh.
And the margin's not as good when you're bulk buying for you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that was one of my, and it probably stays in my mind because it was one of those really early, one of those things that happened in the early days where I was like, right, own the mistake, figure it out quick. And I think that's where for me, like the key learnings are really stress test it in a trial. Don't just kind of, think you've done the right thing by putting it into a business for 24 hours and checking that the recipes work, but really stress test it. And secondly, and this is actually something that went in my favor, was it really showcased to me the benefit of having such strong operational relationships that I'd already built.
Yeah.
Because when that happened, instead of frustration kicking in, actually, people by that point had built a really good working relationship with me. They were able to pick up the phone. They knew that I would be empathetic, understanding, and just work it out.
Yeah.
And actually kind of giving myself that opportunity to build that relationship before anything bad happened like that. It just softened the blow very much.
Sure. And sometimes when something like that happens in a business, it teaches the whole business a lesson, and they end up stronger. It's not going to happen again because we have the ice cream sundae fiasco.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, 100%.
Amazing. And I would imagine that, like, even if something's operationally challenging around that, service is something in restaurants that can make a big difference.
Yes.
So, I mean, the people you're interacting with really change that restaurant experience. I know that service is something you're really passionate about. What do you think is important on that front?
Right. Oh, that's a big question.
You can answer it how you like.
Okay. Firstly, I am really, really passionate about service. I think it's like over time when I've moved out of more of my sort of typical marketing role into more of a guest experience role, actually service plays such a fundamental part in it. It's something I've really leaned into and tried to kind of help define what good service looks like, which normally sits with operators. And I think especially in Dubai, it certainly feels like it's not probably a marketing or brand role to do service, which is what I've noticed.
Yeah.
But again, just like I've said with everything, if you have two people, both brand marketing and ops, kind of all working towards the same mission around what that looks like, I think it works really well. Really simple for me. Like, good service is just all about having team members that are really confident, really welcoming and intuitive around what it is that their guests are looking for. So that's essentially being able to see an issue arise or see a guest need before they even realize it themselves and help them deliver against it. And that's what I believe is like a big, big part of great service. I think what can often be a challenge, and what I've noticed in the UK and here, is that, let's face it, people don't come to work to feel like they're going to do a bad job. No one comes to work to want to do a bad job. No. I think often where service can fall down is the team either don't have clarity on what they need to do, or the brand or knowledge enough on the menu, or it's a training issue. Yeah. They don't have confidence in the structure that they've got around them, or feel as if they've got the autonomy or the trust to like almost step out of their lane or do something that just requires initiative to make sure that they're delivering the optimal guest experience. I think it's just all around clarity, confidence, and just feeling supported and trusted. And when one of those things falls down, I think that's often where service can start to feel quite transactional, quite scripted. Yeah. It's a safety net. You don't want to kind of step outside that lane because you're not quite sure if what you're about to say or do is the right thing, and you're not sure if you're going to get in trouble for doing it. So you just stay in that lane. And I think honestly, that's a big challenge. I think it's actually in some respects a bigger challenge here from what I've seen. But yeah, that's kind of my top and bottom of it.
That makes total sense. And I think the thing with services, it's something you feel the difference. It's not something that, I mean, it does show up in the numbers, but that's when it's kind of too late. So that is, again, why it's really important to have, both a clear understanding of what good service looks like, but also constantly being close to the service to see what's happening, to make those slight tweaks and changes, every day, rather than waiting for it to slip. Because once it's slipped, the customer's already, they're not coming back.
Yeah. And I remember when about a year or so ago when I launched this service program that I referenced, and I remember showing this graph that was a direct correlation between the service review scores and like-for-like sales on the business. So you could see for every venue that was, say, 4 stars or above on like Google, they were in higher like-for-like sales growth than those that weren't. And it sounds really obvious, but I think sometimes we're guilty of almost separating the two topics, whereas they just go hand in hand. Like if you've got great service, your guests are more willing to come back, but whilst they're there, they're more willing to spend more. It's just, it all goes hand in hand.
And sometimes you just need that person in the business reminding everyone and bringing them together to say, this is important. Okay, we haven't got long left.
Okay.
So whilst I've got you, as someone that's lived in both in the UK and in the UAE, I want to do a few quick fire questions to understand your favourites in the UK and in the UAE.
Okay, go for it.
So first, what's your favourite coffee spot?
Is this in the UK or the UAE?
Do the UK, then the UAE.
Okay, coffee spot. So I would have to say 2. So I've got my go-to was always Boston Tea Party in the UK.
Nice.
Loved the coffee, and I loved a lot of the values that they stood for.
Yeah.
And Watch House. Really like both of those. And in the UAE, I would go for Arabica.
Yeah.
And I also really like some of the independents that are in Al Sakal Avenue.
Yeah, great spot. I'm there almost every weekend.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh,
cool.
No, it's very cool. I love it there.
It is. Okay, and your favourite kind of neighbourhood spots?
So that would be, for the UK, I would normally go somewhere like Gale's Bakery or Loungers, because literally they've popped up everywhere. They're probably the biggest growing brand, I think, in the UK in the last maybe 2 years or so. And in Dubai, I would have to say Leto. It's honestly like, I would probably put it up there with one of my favourite brands now. I go there most weeks.
Amazing.
Like everything about not just the service and just how welcoming everyone is as soon as you come back, but I think they've just got everything right. The food, the environment. I'm a big fan of Leto.
It sounds like it.
I am.
And who's someone that's kind of nailed the brand experience from end to end?
So probably the first brand that comes to mind for me in the UK would be Dishoom. I really love everything that they've done. I think there's about 15 of them now. I feel like the guest experience and journey is really considered. And the service, again, is just so effortless and human. Food is fantastic. So I would say Dishoom. And then for Dubai, I went to the Guild the other week for a Sunday roast, and it blew me away. So I'd have to say the Guild.
I haven't actually been for the Sunday roast, but I'm going the weekend after next, so I'm looking forward to
it. Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, you should definitely go. Well, you are going. You'll
I am,
look forward to it.
And then just the brand that makes you think, they just get hospitality.
They get hospitality. Okay, so I would probably say... So in the UK, there's one that comes to mind, which is really random, and I'm not sure how many people have heard of it, but it's a restaurant called Beast, which is in London. It's a steakhouse restaurant, and honestly, still to this day, I think about it. It was just phenomenal. And in terms of in Dubai, I'd probably say my favourite place that I've been to so far has been a place called City Social, which is by a chef called Jason Atherton, and is in Dubai Marina. And again, it was just perfect. Everything from beginning to end of Spahn.
Amazing. Great recommendations. I've been to about half of them, so I've got to check the rest out.
Fantastic.
Amazing. Well, it's been fantastic to speak to you, Amy.
And thank you.
Thanks
you
for
too.
sharing so much of your knowledge. I'm
My
sure
pleasure.
the listeners have enjoyed it. We'll be back with another episode in a couple of weeks.